All right, so let's jump into this deep dive into Fedora Linux and specifically the Fedora Linux 42 beta release. And, for those who maybe aren't as familiar, Fedora is known for being a really cutting edge Linux distribution, very much community driven.
Absolutely. And I think, what makes this beta so interesting is just how much has changed. We've got new additions, we've got different desktop environments, and there's some really significant under the hood changes that are going to make even some of the most, seasoned Linux users kind of sit up and take notice.
I'm all ears. What's the biggest news in this beta release?
Well, the KDE Plasma Desktop got a pretty big promotion. It's no longer just a spin, it's a full-fledged Fedora edition. And this is really more than just a name change. It really kind of indicates, that KDE's rising popularity and just the really strong support it's earned within the Fedora community.
Okay, so KDE is kind of becoming this like first-class citizen within Fedora. What does that actually mean for someone using Fedora?
Well, I think it means that you can expect, a more stable KDE experience on Fedora. There will be dedicated resources to it. And also we're seeing wider hardware support, including, even on power systems. So if you're someone who's into like the Talos workstation from Raptor Computing Systems, you can now run the full KDE stack on those machines. It's really exciting for open power enthusiasts.
Wow, that's a huge step.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned new desktop environments, and there's one name that really stuck out to me. The Fedora Cosmic Spin. Tell me about this intriguing newcomer.
Well, the Cosmic desktop environment actually comes from the folks over at System 76, and they're also the same folks who are behind pop.os. And what's really cool about Cosmic is that it's built on Rust. And if you know anything about Rust, it's really known for its speed and its reliability.
Yeah, Rust has gained a lot of popularity. It's known for its security and its performance. Does Cosmic actually inherit those benefits? And, what makes Cosmic different from other desktop environments out there?
I think it does because it's built on such a solid, foundation. And I think one of the interesting things is that it offers a hybrid approach to window management. So it's sort of like a blend of tiling and floating windows. You've got window stacks, it uses tabs, so you can easily switch between different applications. And the level of customization that they're aiming for is really deep. It plays really nicely with GTK and eventually even Qt. So they're trying to hit that sweet spot of like flexibility and user friendliness.
So it sounds like they've really thought about the design philosophy behind Cosmic. Now let's talk about the installation process, because even that's gotten a makeover with the new Anaconda installer. I've heard some rumblings about this. What exactly has changed?
Yeah, so Anaconda got a huge facelift. I think one of their main focuses was really user friendliness. So they've got a brand new default web UI. They've got, progress indicators, so you can actually see what's happening. If you get stuck, there's built-in help. And there's even a configuration review before you finalize everything, so you can go back and make sure that everything's set up the way you want it to be.
It sounds a lot more approachable, especially for people who are, brand new to Linux and might be a little intimidated by the whole process.
Yeah.
What about partitioning? Because I know that can be a really tricky part for a lot of people.
I think they simplified that as well. So the partitioning setup actually has this like guided function now that just makes setting up your system super easy, even if you're dual booting. And then let's say down the line you need to reinstall. Well, now there's a really handy reinstall Fedora option, which, will be a lifesaver. So it seems like they've really thought of just about everything to make this as smooth and as painless as possible.
Yeah, it sounds like Anaconda has become quite user-friendly. But Fedora isn't all about flashy new features, is it? What about some of those under-the-hood improvements that might not be so obvious but make a huge difference?
Oh, there's a ton of those. There's significant updates that, you might not necessarily see, but they're really crucial for, developers or just the overall health of the system. So, for example, they've got a Python setup tools update, which is super important for Python developers and package management.
Why is that update so important, especially for Python developers using Fedora?
Well, Python is kind of like a cornerstone of Fedora, and Python setup tools is basically the foundation, right? That's what they use to build, distribute, and install all the different Python packages. So this update really streamlines that whole process. It makes it a lot smoother for developers to contribute to the Fedora ecosystem. And then let's not forget about some of the improvements they made to DNF5.
DNF5, that's the package manager, right?
Yeah.
What kind of improvements are we talking about?
Exactly. So DNAME 5 is even smarter now about keeping your system clean and secure. So it can automatically remove those expired repository keys that can sometimes, just clutter things up and maybe even lead to, potential security vulnerabilities.
Oh, I bet that's a welcome change for anyone who's, concerned about security. Any other under-the-hood heroes we should mention?
Well, we can't forget about Ruby. So Ruby is getting a pretty big jump in this release. It's going to version 3.4, which makes Fedora even more appealing for Ruby developers.
That is a pretty big jump for Ruby. What's the significance of that update?
I mean, it brings all the usual things that developers love. Performance enhancements, new features, and of course the usual bug fixes. So it really keeps Fedora on the cutting edge for anybody who's working with Ruby.
It sounds like Fedora 42 Beta is packed with updates for developers.
Hmm.
Now, let's talk a little bit about what's in store specifically for Fedora Workstation users. There's a couple things that really stood out to me, starting with this transition to SDL3 and Wayland by default for SDL apps. Can you break that down a little bit?
Sure. So SDL, or Simple Direct Media Layer, is basically this cross-platform development library. And it's mainly used for things like, graphics, audio, input handling. And moving to SDL3 basically means better performance, a smoother experience, especially when you pair it with Wayland.
Now, you mentioned Wayland. For anyone who might not be super familiar, what is Wayland and why is this transition to Wayland by default a big deal?
So Wayland is basically this modern display server, and it's kind of gradually replacing the older X system in Linux. It's all about performance improvements, better security, and just a more kind of fluid user experience, especially for applications that are specifically designed to work with it natively. So by making this the default for SDL apps, Fedora is really kind of moving towards this more modern and robust graphics stack.
It sounds like a pretty big shift towards a more modern desktop. I'm definitely intrigued to learn more.
Yeah, and I would definitely encourage everyone to check out the Fedora Linux 42 change set page for like a full rundown of all the different changes. There's a ton of information there for anyone who wants to really, dive deep.
Awesome suggestion. So for our listeners who might still be, on the fence about diving into the world of Fedora, what would be your final takeaway for them?
I would say jump in, explore, explore what Fedora 42 Beta has to offer. I think you might be really surprised by how much it actually resonates with, your own computing needs and your own values.
Yeah, it's a chance to experience that cutting edge of Linux, to contribute to its development, to be a part of this community that's shaping the future of open source.
And who knows, you might discover your new favorite operating system.
Well, that's a wrap for this deep dive into Fedora Linux 42 Beta. We hope you found it insightful, engaging, and maybe even a little bit inspiring.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the fascinating world of technology.